Hey, I'm your host, Kenyatta Hall, business and product strategist, former founder, and professional pivoter. And welcome to Kenyatta Speaks, the Power to Pivot podcast, where we talk about the intersection between tech, business, and personal growth, helping you pivot with power, purpose, and a plan, because staying stuck isn't an option. My mission is to help you make that pivot in your career and your business by providing you with practical tools, real talk, actionable steps, and engaging interviews, going deep into the highs and lows of tech, entrepreneurship, and what it takes to stay sane through it all. No surface level BS over here, just real stories, real pivots, and real wins. Because my goal is to not just inspire you, but inspire you to action. Let's get it. The podcast Kenyatta Speaks. There's power in your pivot. And we have Catie King with us from Stradia Partners, professional pivoter. That's what we focus on over here is professional pivoters at your service. She once was in corporate, I wouldn't say corporate baddie. You know what I'm saying? She was in corporate. She was already killing it. Corporate, and she made that decision to head on out. She now has Stradia Partners. And so they help organizations, not who you are.
No, but I think it's a manifestation of what we've learned, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so me and two co-founders started Stradia Partners to help organizations to consolidate their data and put it to work with revenue driving AI. The translation of that is like, please step away from the spreadsheet, dear God. I think we realized that so many multi-billion-dollar international corporations are still just like Excel has them in a chokehold. So we do the very unglamorous work of data integration in complex internal operations environments, and once that stuff's done, you can do the cool things, right? We spend a lot of time talking about the power of AI, the power of natural language processing, the power of machine learning, and even basic analytics, right? The power of reporting. But none of those things are possible if all your data is living in 14 spreadsheets and like Cheryl from finance still closes your monthly books.
Not Cheryl. Not Cheryl.
It's not Cheryl's fault. So,
Cheryl get a bad rap over here, man.
shout out to Cheryl. She's doing the work, and that's true. Like everybody's doing the best they can with what they have.
I agree.
A lot of organizations we work with, they have these homegrown solutions, whether it's in Excel or Monday.com or Airtable, and they're realizing, man, this really sucks. Like I am spending more time configuring this thing than I am doing my actual job. And so yeah, anyway, we get to help people get out of that trap and start to see the art of the possible once their data is clean and consolidated.
Oh, I love that. The art of the possible. Is that a tagline?
So actually, I picked that up because of an insult. Yeah, this comes from corporate land, like using political speak. Like somebody one time told me I had trouble with the art of the possible, and that stuck with me.
So that needs to be a tagline for Stradia Partners is the art of the possible.
The art of the possible.
Yeah, you can build so much off that. That's
yeah.
Keep that handy.
Yeah, we kept the tagline, like the origins of our name are stupid, but there's references to famous women in tech actually, but there's also references to video games, so we kept that motif. So our current tagline is achievement unlocked.
Oh, okay, I like that too. So now that you're in Strategy Partners, I think this is super important to talk about data, right? Before we even jump into just who you are, since we're on your business, it's what you do, not who you are, but on your business right now. I think one of the core things about AI is that everybody leaps to go build, but forget there needs to be a strategy for building. I think, the conversations I always have, people like, oh, I want a chatbot. Great. Why? Oh, I want to do something. Do you even have the data to do that? Do you even have what you actually need to make those things happen? Right? So it is the art of the possible, but we need to understand before we get to possible, we need to get to feasible.
Exactly. So you nailed it. So we've actually run into some clients who aren't ready for us, and the reason is we're coming in to build product, which in operations use cases. So most of what we do is internal. It's helping teams work better together, companies be a well-oiled machine, derive new data based on what they already know, revenue driving practices. When you do that, you're sort of pouring concrete around your people and your process with product. So you're saying,
I agree.
What do we do every day? What would you say you do here? You need to have an answer to that, and then say, okay, let's help you do it faster, better, more effectively, with inline intelligence about what's going on. Like, let's not price your product like, oh, it's feeling like $1,000 today. Like, let's give you intelligence to be able to make good decisions that's data driven. But before you get to all that, a lot of clients, when we meet with them, people who aren't a good fit for us are folks that are still asking questions about, like, I'm not actually sure what my job is, and I don't know who's in charge of that, and I don't really know what our process is. Like, those are the questions you have to answer before thinking about automation, before thinking about elevating your data quality.
Yeah.
So often they just jump to the end and they don't like stop to examine. And that's the hard work, right? Of reflecting on what is our business, what is our process, how do our teams relate to and work with one another. And that's not our space. We're not in that. Maybe I need to call you, Kenya. You can go.
Call me, because that is actually my space.
Yeah, great. I'll call you in.
That's my space.
You can just let us know when they're ready for us.
Yes. Well, I think what happens too, so just FYI, I know Catie from being in the Durham ecosystem. We found out that we both been in product management forever, and we both were like, we're gonna start our own shit, and we did. And she got Stradia partnered at the Catalyst HQ, and then we realized today, as we were talking before this all got started, about how much we actually just don't like how people talk about product. But that's just a sidebar. But I wanted to give you some. I wanted to give people context on how we know each other, but in relation to just talking about that people don't have the strategy, right? Like they want all of these beautiful things, great data, but really nobody's really talking about, do we understand our process enough to know how to automate that? Do we actually understand the outcomes that we want, or are we equating our activity to outputs? So a deliverable. Because I think that's what people think about is that, when they say, oh, we've done something, they think of deliverables. Right? They think of, oh, we created a playbook. And I'm like, that's great, a deliverable, but what do you plan to do with that?
What's the outcome?
What's the outcome, right? So the outcome, we created a playbook that's going to get us to 10 million in 24 months. That becomes the thing, right? And then we could say, what are the things that we actually need in order to make that happen, right? And if data quality is one of those things, and we need to figure out whether or not our data is even viable enough to be put in this, or do we have the systems in place to execute that? Those are all strategic activities that people don't do before they decide to jump into AI and automation. And I think that's important to note, because that's the things that people are not talking about enough.
Absolutely. And to double down on that, and I've seen you write a little bit about this recently, and I couldn't agree more, is I think people let those types of deliverables, which tend to be pretty broad in scope and like, building that plan of here's how we get to 10 million in a year, 10 months, whatever. Okay, in the time you spent writing that stuff down, which reflection and strategy is important, don't get me wrong. Like, fixing your intentions in a document and taking the time to plan is absolutely always a good use of time. Also, are you taking the next action and just like doing something? Like, what are you doing every day to get one step closer to that thing? And so that's something I see a lot also in kind of a product anti-pattern, is folks spend so much time whiteboarding and mirroring and strategizing and like talking at one another that they don't spend any time trying something, changing something, experimenting, doing. What are you shipping? What are you testing? What are you trying that's going to get you closer to that thing? And you can sit in a room and talk at each other all day, but like, what are the outcomes
that you're trying to drive to? Yeah, and you know what? I think of, the one thing I take from product is understanding the 0 to 1 mentality, and actually take that mentality towards strategy work. I think when people think of strategy work, we think of a 100-page document for larger corporations, maybe no document at all, because I do think, no shade to the lean startup. There's no shade to that. But the lean startup doesn't incorporate strategy first. It incorporates experimentation first. But that would assume that you know some things first, right? Like it just assumes that, right? Because market research does matter, and what are the quickest wins to get there. So that's why I always take a 0 to 1 approach to strategy. That's the thing that I think about is, let's define what that looks like, and then what do we need and what can we do first, not what do we need to do, because what we need to do may not be feasible.
Right.
But what can we do is a better question, right? So I think now that we understand how, the intersections and what you guys do for Stradia partners, tell us about you, because what I see in the background is the guitar.
That's right. Yeah, I'm a washed up musician. Now I'm playing for an audience of no one. Maybe my wife. After one too many whiskeys. Yeah, I grew up in the area and grew up playing music and writing music. So I've got, if you want to embarrass me, you can stalk me on the internet and see if I've got some music out there in the world.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a really long time since that. So my last album I released in 2013. So
Oh
literally,
my God. First off, you released an album.
yeah, I've got a few out, but man, old. It's like all the teenage, like everything is hard and everything hurts feelings, just all in there.
I
So
love that. I love that. So tell us your journey. Tell us how we got to now that we know that one, you was in product,
yeah,
you own your own business. Obviously, you cutting albums over here. I ain't even know that.
that's no
Cutting
secret.
albums, right? And but tell us how do we get to this, Catie? Tell us about how what was that process for you? What are some of the ups and downs that you have? And then second question, we'll probably have to repeat this, is then what was that moment that you needed to go work for yourself?
Hmm. Yeah, to answer the first one, like how I got here was completely by accident. So, I I went to Carolina for undergrad and I started off just like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like I'm gonna go into business and I'm also gonna be a music major as well.
Okay.
Nope, dropped that like a sack of bricks like 2 weeks in because it turns out I knew nothing about classical guitar and did not want to be classically trained in guitar. If I had gone somewhere like App State where they had a music production program, probably would have looked a lot different. But no, I did not want to be classically trained in music. And then the business school of Carolina is you have to apply. So I took all the prereqs, I did the whole thing, and then they were like, "Hey, listen, you're like pretty bad at math," and I was like, "Yeah, good point." And they're like, "Yeah, you can't."
FYI, I don't know if any other school I think there are other schools that do that, but if you go to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, even if you make it into the school, you still have to apply internally to the business school.
Yeah,
That is not, and you have to be a sophomore. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
something
you have
that,
to go through all those prerequisites. So it was like
yes.
calculus, microeconomics, managerial and financial accounting. Like these are not things that my brain groks. Like this brain does not understand that stuff, and I tried very hard, and it still didn't work. I love writing. I love reading. I like language arts stuff. Math just does not compute. So yeah, I didn't get into the business school, and so I
Nothing
was
wrong with that.
yeah, and I was hanging out as a sophomore. I played rugby, which changed my life. So I was living as a sophomore when I got rejected. I was living with my teammates in the rugby house, and I came home and I was like, well, I was devastated. Like I don't know what to do now. I'm halfway.
Yeah, like that was a pathway.
Yeah. So I was like halfway through my college degree, completely just unmoored. My teammate was like, I'm in the journalism school in the advertising degree. I think you'd like it. Just go check it out. And so you have to apply to that too. It's also a professional school. So applied to journalism school, got in fortunately, and did PR, which I really loved. And at the time, I still had not heard the words product manager. Like that was not
Hmm.
a career I was ever exposed to. But within the journalism schools, there were a lot of like graphic design, web design,
Hmm.
videography, marketing, PR, like the strategic comms. So that kind of exposed me to some of the concepts of product management. And then I saw a flyer on a bathroom stall door for the entrepreneurship minor. And I was
Are
like,
you kidding? Wait, time out. You applied to Schufert?
well, it wasn't Schubert at the time, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I got into the E minor, and I remember showing up and looking around the room and being like, these are all my campus crushes. Like these are all the people I want to be like. You know, these are the people I want to emulate, and they were all in one room, and that's how I knew. I was like, this is where I need to be. This is the spot.
Can we pause right there really
Yeah.
quickly?
Don't you
So
teach in the E minor?
I do teach in the E minors now. So, in reference to this, so Catie applied to the entrepreneurship minor. It's in the School of Economics at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I teach in the what's not long. It's still the E minor, but it's called the Shoe for Entrepreneurial Program, and I teach it as a. They call me the social entrepreneur in residence,
Oh, great.
professor in practice, and I teach brand for social impact. So my goal is to teach students to build purposeful, profitable brands, whether that's internally in a company or externally in their own business. But oh my gosh, okay, family, hey.
So yeah, and I actually went back. Susie Green asked me to help speak in a class, and it was nuts. Like when I was in it, my class intro class was 125 people, and intro class is now 450
Yes.
participants. And
Yeah.
so sitting in front of that class, I was like, "This is wild." And it was also really full circle for me being up front instead of sitting in the seats.
I know. Oh my God, I did not know that.
Yeah, it was that was a milestone for me. I felt really good about that. But
Yeah, so really that was your first pivot was not get into the B
yeah,
school, but
from
then
seat to speaker,
yeah, so
believe
then
it or
you from
not.
seed to speaker, not getting into B school, but then getting into the entrepreneurial
Yeah,
program, and then
and
coming back into B.
I think also like to get real, like I think I'm so grateful for those moments. I was talking to a mentor about this the other day. Like, I think that kind of got me off the conveyor belt where it's like, okay, what do you actually want? Like, figure it out. And I think also like learning I was gay really young, like coming out at 16, that also got me off the conveyor belt of like, you don't have to do what anybody expects you to do. Like, life is about making the choice for you. And those moments early on, like I credit those to being able to just sort of be authentically who I want to be and like make those choices, which I think freed me up to feel comfortable and really ready to start my own business.
Hmm.
Versus I think a lot of people don't have those like kicked off the conveyor belt moments
Yeah.
much later in their life. And it causes a lot more friction when you want to make a change that is right for you because you're not used to being like, you know what, let's try something different. Let's pivot here. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful for those hard moments that kind of like gave me the stability and comfort in those pivot moments, I think.
Oh man, I love that because I think about, feeling as if you have had to have you have had to have had success the way that everyone else has
Yeah.
had success in order to be successful, right? So that may mean going to school, getting into B school, graduating, getting that job, moving up the corporate ladder, and that's cool for some, but we only seem to glorify that. And I think even in entrepreneurship, we only seem to glorify the people who came from that. And there's no shade to that. But the way that I see, at least, because I didn't come from that, right? So my background was I don't think I stayed at a job longer than 2.5 years. I had one and I stayed there for 3.9 years. And for a long time, maybe up until, let's see, about 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't honor that about myself. I didn't honor that that was my pathway. I still felt as if I needed to have experience being or having that title or something like that in order to validate my own skill set. You know what I'm saying? In order to validate that I was that girl.
No, it's listen, you're not
Right? You know
wrong.
what I'm saying?
It's all I get, but it's all made up.
But it's all made up. It's all made up. It's all made up. And so, I had to really get out of that mode that I too had something that was valuable and that was critical that people needed and that people wanted, not even people just needed, but people wanted, and really lean into that. But I think a lot of times people don't into that. They think they have to have this pre-described way of success versus defining it for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even need to start about like how we get on LinkedIn, we get on Instagram, and all we see, we're just bombarded with points of comparison all day.
Oh,
It's just like how do we escape? You can't, right? You can't escape. All day you're getting confronted with like somebody doing it differently than you, potentially you perceive to be better. And I think just getting away from that trap and realizing like, early on I picked the mantra like be happy and build cool shit. And like that's all I really need out of this is like I want to live a happy life and I want to build things I'm proud of, things that I'm proud of. And anything else like, working for the FANG company, getting the head title, getting anything like that, it's like, yeah, that's gravy, but like ultimately if those two boxes are checked, like be happy, build cool shit.
it's a win. I agree with that. I like to be happy. Mine is like I would say one of my core things that I would say I want to do is help people see the light at the end of the tunnel
Mm,
and create and help provide a pathway to get there. I think it's so much where people just don't see the light, their own light, and they just haven't created that pathway to get there. Because people don't tell you that spaces like this, or when you're trying to pivot or trying to find your way, is that not even sometimes you always need somebody else to see it for you. So the pathway and help with that
yeah,
because it's personal to you. Like entrepreneurship is personal to me. Entrepreneurship is personal to everybody. And so when you have that personal attachment to it, you actually just have a very subjective look. And so I think when people think about, hiring somebody to help them see, they're thinking, oh, I have a gap. Yeah, you probably have some gaps, but actually, 9 out of 10 times, it's really not a gap thing. It could be, but it's a variety of factors. But a lot of it is that it's hard to make decisions based upon your own knowledge because it's yours.
right, yeah, and
Right? Like I know a lot about product and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't build this on my own because it's mine. Right? I need somebody with an objective point of view who don't have, who is like, girl, you can do this. And you're like, right, I can.
yeah, it's critical, and that's such an important role to play. Like, I would be nowhere without the mentors and friends that I mean, like I just listed one, right? My friend Hannah, my teammate, was like listen, you're gonna be fine. Like, go this direction, you know. And I've had mentors and friends who have kept me on track and pushed me this entire time. And like that is the difference, I think, between me being able to navigate the uncertainty of my career and like finding footholds and continuing to climb, is that I've been lucky enough to have that network of people just like keeping me in check, holding up that mirror, showing me the light.
Yeah.
That's a really important role to play, Kenya. Like, people need that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I try to be. So tell us, so once you graduated and you were the hunky there, I got my college degree. What was next? Cause I know we talked
Panic.
about like what was next? Cause did you go into big corporate? What did you do? What was your career like before you got to Stradia?
So I started my own company in college. So I started a music magazine called Resound.
Well, okay.
Yeah, so if you've ever heard of Her Campus, I think there's still one at UNC.
Uh,
It's a women's journalism network that is just based on college journalists write for their campus. But there's a network, a platform that unifies all of that journalism into, one monetizable advertising platform, which is like Victoria's Secret's dream, right? To have 200 college campuses of women writing the college version of Cosmo.
Okay. I've heard of it, but I didn't know it was that.
Yeah, and I saw that and I was like, this should exist for music. The local music scenes in college spaces are, the breeding ground of the next big thing.
Right.
College students know what's going on, college radio, like it's the emerging space for up and coming music and musicians. There should be a similar network for college music journalism. And so I founded Resound to do that. And it was such a learning curve. We launched I think we got up to 14 college campuses,
Wow.
and we had some really cool people on our advisory board. We had Matt Habib, who is the head of digital advertising for Rolling Stone. So it was a huge learning curve. I went through launching the venture, which was in the business school, so that was a fun time because I got to
Yeah.
be in the business school after getting rejected from
Yep.
school.
Yep.
So I won that, which
Of
was
course.
that was like my big moment.
Yes, I would have been like,
I won the Coach's Choice Award at the end. It was like elimination too. So if they didn't like where you landed at the end of a mod, you got kicked out. So it started with 33 companies and ended with 6.
okay.
And so anyway, so did Resound, and when I left, I had kind of started a tour of accelerators and incubators on the East Coast to see if we could find a space for the company, because no revenue, no technical co-founder, lots of traction in like non-technical and advertising ways because we had so many branches, but
Hmm.
could not figure out how to scale effectively. And
Yeah.
so I graduated, had this startup I really wanted to make work, and was talking with Reverb Nation in Durham about maybe making something work with them. That didn't work out. So I ended up jobless with a lease in downtown Durham. Like, what do I do? And just completely by luck, one of the incubators I talked to was housed in the Washington Post. It was called WAPO Labs. And they sent me an email and they were like, hey, we're actually merging all of our news technologies into a consumer news app called Trove. We'd love your help running a beta testing program because you have such a huge network of students who are in journalism who could try the app and tell us about their experience.
Look at that.
And I was like, great, because I have to pay my rent. So I will
Right.
do what you want me to do. I will clean your floors in DC. Like, I will do anything. And so they asked me to do that, and I had a bunch of our students beta test the app and consolidated the feedback and I had no idea what I was doing, Kenyatta. I had never run a beta testing program, but I figured it out. And they were like, this is good. Can you also do this for us? And I was like, yes, again, about the rent. I still have to pay rent. And so they
You
just
was
kept
like, what
saying,
what you need? I
yeah,
got
what you
it.
need? You need me to organize your snacks? I can come out
Right.
there.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
No
No
problem.
problem.
Yep, sounds good. I ended up answering if somebody emailed help@trove.com. That was me. I helped answer all of the support emails. That was a ride. Um, so over time, they just kept giving me more jobs, and eventually they were like, "All right, you're doing enough for us. Like, we'll bring you on full time." So they brought me on full time in product marketing, which I didn't know existed until I started doing it, and that's how I got into product. Was face first stumbling, and
What year was that? What
so
year was
that was
that?
like 2013, 2014.
So I asked that because I really feel that product didn't really honestly have a name for real until like 2017.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Like something like that. Something like that. I cuz I never actually heard of product until I started working at a company and I had somebody, so I have the Agile Product Dojo. It helps aspiring and existing product managers, amplify their potential. And he told me we worked together. That's how he ended up becoming my business partner and BFF. And he says, you're doing product work. I said, what's that?
Same. Exactly.
I was like,
Yeah.
he was like, yeah, you're doing product work here. And I already knew I knew how to do the work. He gave me the language because product people just have different language that they use for work.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like with any field, right? It's the
Right.
language that
And
you
it's so
use.
different. It's so different industry. Like also things I've learned now, like there's product managers in pharmaceuticals, there's product managers in video games. That job is completely different, does not resemble the
Yeah.
product manager in software as a service. So yeah, I joined Shrove and there were product managers working there. And so I was like, that job's cool. And because I was in product marketing, they had this really cool algorithmically driven email newsletter. So if you really liked snake plants and you wanted a daily newsletter about snake
Don't
plants.
judge it. Don't judge it. We going through some things over
She's looking
here.
good back there. She's killing it.
Okay. Okay.
If you really love snake plants or indoor gardening, you can get like a daily, they scraped like 40,000 RSS feeds and you would get only snake plant news in your inbox every day.
Man, that's giving machine learning activities.
It was like, it was so impressive. You know what's funny is my career is like by accident. I've worked in companies that are sort of on the cutting edge of a field, but then don't make it. Like I worked at Automated Insights where they were doing natural language processing and generation prior to these large language models going nuts. And it was anyway. But yeah, so that I made the pivot to product management there by working with the engineering team who was managing that email listserv. And I was fortunate enough to have engineers in my circle who loved to teach and nerded out on the subject matter and could just impart knowledge over beers with me about like here's all the ways that this is working and how engineering works and how large data models work. And so that was my kind of on the job training for engineering.
Really? You know what? I haven't really met engineers that don't like to teach. So when people tell me, I haven't met any, and I think it's because people don't really ask engineers questions about what they do. They just expect them to do things. So, and I like with you, I'm non-technical as well, but now we're technical to be dangerous, technical enough to be dangerous.
You just gotta
But
know bullshit.
yeah, you gotta know enough to call bullshit, and I say that all the time.
It's so true.
It's so true. Like you don't need to be a coder. You need to understand what's happening enough to say that's not right.
It's like it's gonna take you 2 weeks to change the color of a button. I don't think so.
Yeah. Let's try that again. Try that again. Yeah, let's try that again. I know that's not true. I know it's not true. Matt, do we need to talk to your? Let's have a chat with let's all have a chat with your boss because I feel like there's some ways we can work around this. That's cool.
Give on that, yeah.
I'd love to get a second opinion on just exactly. Let's talk to somebody else. I think your boss.
Explain it to me in like layman's terms why it's gonna take 2 weeks for you.
Yes, please explain this to me.
I don't understand.
Yeah, it might be a me thing. It might be a me thing. But one thing I'm not going to do is apologize. Like, I don't do that. I don't do that.
There's no need.
No. So many times I've seen in corporate spaces where women leave with "I'm sorry." I'm gonna leave with that. And me not leading with "I'm sorry" can be intimidating for others because I never lead conversations with "Hey, I'm sorry," but because I'm not ever going to be sorry for having an opinion because everybody in this room has an opinion.
You shouldn't be. And that's
Now that probably got me in trouble, but
you should get
that's
that
what it
opinion.
is.
You're paid to have an opinion. That's the point.
Paid to have an informed opinion. Paid product managers are very much so informed. Paid to have opinions that are informed and are putting together, are connecting the dots.
Exactly.
Amongst not just product and engineering. I think people, when they think of product, they think of, oh, you're just building a product, you're just working with engineering, just working with design. And I'm also thinking about how we need to explain this product to marketing and how we also need to actually go on a road show because other people within the organization too need to understand how this product works so they can effectively talk about it. I also need to make sure that I have a whole nother storyline for the people above me and their peers above them, and to ensure that people equal to me fully understand what's going on. It's more than just going to meetings and documentation. It's really understanding how to articulate value
Going to meetings and documentation is like the 1% of the 1%.
It's the 1%, and just like it's like when people be like, "Do you know how to write a user story?"
Yeah, and okay, if you found any of the engineers I've ever worked with, maybe in the last 8 years, and pulled them on the show, and it's like, talk to me about Catie's user stories, and they'd be like, she doesn't really write them. Like, I'm not I'm not employed to like read Jira to grown adults. Like, and so this is part of now, like later in my career, building teams and hiring people. I'm hiring for people who can think critically, and that includes engineers. Like, if you're an engineer who just wants a ticket or design or something thrown over the wall to you, and you want to do the bare minimum of what's set in front of you and then toss it over to QA and not think critically, you're not going to be a good fit for my team. And I don't believe that's the majority of engineers. I think the majority of engineers want to understand the why of what they're building, want to understand the strategy, want to be involved in the development of that, want their good ideas to be heard at the table. And so, like, it's not about the cleanliness of your Jira, although if you get disorganized, that can be an issue. It's not about the quality of your user story. It's about how well every person in a cross functional team understands the why
Mm,
it is you're building. And, like,
mm.
I'm not here to read Jira to you. Like, let's talk about the outcome we're charging towards. And then, like, whatever we need to put in this cute little platform to help you understand, go do this to get this outcome, we'll put in a cute little platform. But, like, no more, no less, because it's a waste of our time. Like,
No, I agree with that. So that leads back to, since you were in leadership. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you end up getting the product marketing, then went to product, and that was at one company.
yeah, so the shift to product, yeah, happened kind of. I was doing the job, and then we got acquired by an ad tech company within the same holding company.
Okay.
So went over there, and they built. It was like half. It was interesting. It was half advertising firm, half technology company, and they've since split them off.
Mm.
We built a brand. I got to build a brand new platform from scratch for Fortune 100 brands. So that was really cool. And it absolutely made the world a worse place. Like, I'm sorry about the boots. I'm sorry about the boots that follow you on the internet now, because we helped Michael Kors know when you're going to sneeze. Like, but I think the learning curve there was the power of huge amounts of data and integrated data. So we were able to take first party data from big brands, merge that with third party data, and then slice and dice that to deploy it across social platforms, and then do some pretty complex reporting.
Man, wow, this is so interesting how you said you don't like math.
Well, I think the concept of math makes sense, but then you give me, like, balancing credits and debits on an
It's
account.
the math problems. Okay, so I totally agree with that. It's really not that I don't understand math. I understand math in the contextual way that people
Right.
taught it, right? Like if X plus B equals A to C, you're like, pause.
Yeah,
What?
well, and then some of this stuff, like when we start talking about regressions and things like that, like I call my co-founders. I'm like, Aaron, Seb, I need you to explain this to me. But I get generally, like, if in layman's terms, and that's what I think I love about my job too, is I get to be the translator between the
Yeah.
folks who understand the super technical, and I'm sure, like, that's one of the coolest things, right? Is to be able to help someone who doesn't get relational databases. Like, hey, here's why it's really cool. Wouldn't you love it if, when you were filling out 2 tabs on a spreadsheet, when you added in a contact and said they belonged at the account Catalyst HQ, that also updated on tab one? And I'd be like, yeah, that'd be pretty nice. Like, I have to update both tabs in my spreadsheet. It's like, well,
Exactly.
relational database.
Yes. You're like, that's
You're like,
it.
wow.
Yes. So man, so that's so funny. So you've been dealing with math
Yeah,
in a way that
exactly.
makes sense to you.
Turns out, yeah.
And because math to me is contextual as well. I feel like, so that's contextual. So you've been working, it looks like you've been working in data a long time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for
on
sure.
the PM, the product management side of data for a very long time. So then you did that. And then what else? 'Cause, man, this
Yeah.
is so interesting.
Yeah, my as my career's gone on, I've just, like, done less and less with, like, delightful user experiences. Like, it's just like I'm not the front end PM. That's not the thing that gets me jazzed. I can respect it, but
But there's multiple functions of PMs. You don't
there
have to
are,
be
yeah, like,
a
there's
front end
people,
PM. Like that's
yeah,
great. There are people who really focus on the user experience, and there are
exactly.
people really that focus on the things to get you to a good user experience, or that
Right.
there are that or other things that or focus on other things that have different outcomes.
Right.
Right?
Right. And that was a learning curve for me throughout my career. Is like, this is the part that really gets me jazzed, is what you can do with a lot of data. So yeah, I worked for, it was called Social Code at the Times, and helped them build out this product. Then I left Social Code and went to a Durham company called Automated Insights. And at the time, they were like at about 70 people, and had completed the exit to be owned by a private equity firm, Vista. So this was like post that acquisition. And they Automated Insights did natural language generation. So that's the process of taking structured data and turning it into prose. And the product was called Wordsmith, and it helped brands like the NFL and AP News, and all sorts of folks be able to take kind of repetitive narratives that came from structured data and make them happen automatically. And that was really my first exposure to, um, obviously generative text, but also, like, how powerful it can be to create systems that help distill large databases into something that
Oh,
and what I loved about working there is I was always the stupidest person in the room, like every day, no matter what room I was in. It was just brilliant, motivated people, and the culture there was immaculate because of that. Like,
really?
yeah, absolutely loved working there. Like, still friends with a lot of people from that team, and they were just all so brilliant, and it was a pleasure. It was a joy to go to work every day. So that was I kind of like model that. That still is. I learned a lot about healthy work culture there.
Hmm.
So anyway, that came to a crashing end after like 10 months because they had the private equity firm basically like fire sold them off to another company called Stats. And they came in basically being like, we're going to shut down all your products and you're here to provide value for shareholders. And I was like, I literally, yeah, it was bad. And some people stayed and wrote it out. And once they figured out how cool the products were, they didn't shut down the products. But I was like, I'm not gonna stick around for this. So I handed in my laptop and my badge the same day.
And not the same day. He was like, you know what? I'm
Yeah,
gonna head out. You was like, you know what? I'm gonna head out. I'm
yeah,
gonna head out.
I did, and I was fortunate enough to like have folks in my life who were like, "Don't worry, we've got opportunities for you." So I pretty quickly left there and went to Transloc, which is a local transit tech company, and that was owned by Ford at the time. Uh,
Hmm.
and I was hired as a PM. They had that was a huge transition because they had a 60-person product team split into 5 separate squads. And that company when I joined, Transloc had pretty immaculately implemented agile processes, and that was like very very well done. So it was the first place I went where I was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to look. And so anyway, got my own squad and got to help build a microtransit product, which is like Lyft Line or Uber Pool, but run by a
Hmm.
transit agency. And that was also a cool way to use data algorithmically for like real world problems because you have to route that. The routing problems there are
Man,
really interesting.
man.
Yeah, so you get to like figure out, okay, we have to pick this person up and this person up, and we're optimizing for ride time. We want ride time to be as short as possible. So knowing we have this many passengers and this many destinations, how do we optimize for the shortest ride time for all these people within the city of Baltimore?
Cool.
And yeah, it was a
So
really
you were living? Were you living in? Are you what? No, it's Durham based, so you weren't living
yeah,
up there,
this
but you
Durham
were.
based it was we're an RTP. The cool part about this also was my dad spent his entire career in public transit and actually led Triangle Transit Authority for 8 years. So we were like right across the street from Triangle Transit. It's Go Triangle now, and they were a client, and so that made him happy that I got to work in.
Aw, look at you.
So that was great, and those teams were also really brilliant, and that um they went through Ford ended up purchasing two of their main competitors, and it was a triple merger, and Ford did not choose leadership or product suite, and the product suites were all duplicative.
Oh, why did
Yes,
they buy them all then?
dude, I can't even begin to explain the dumpster fire that ensued. Like it was a
Oh
master
God.
in what not to do. It was so bad. It was so bad. And so my director, Ashley Berenson, who I adore, she left, and she basically was like, your turn, and tapped me in to be the director. So here I am with an actual dumpster fire on my hands, the director of product of this. She might have left before the triple merger, actually. No, maybe during. I don't. I've blacked it all out. It was
Let's talk. So I would say this. I'm gonna tell everybody: just because people work or make decisions in larger companies doesn't always mean they're making the best decisions. I think that's also a misnomer. Not to say that people are not smart, 'cause I don't believe that.
no, right.
But sometimes I think people give people who have a lot of something, like money, attribution of
Mm.
intelligence, or making always the best decisions, or giving them a lot of grace. And what I'm saying to people, especially in these times, is the same grace that you extend those type of people extend to yourself in your own failures and your own times of pivot. Extend the same grace to yourself that you give those people. Right. Because what people do have that people don't understand is that they have the privilege to fail. And there is a such thing as a privilege to fail.
Yes.
Right? There is a privilege to that. So extend that.
Yes. Absolutely. And if you have the opportunity to and the safety nets to fail, wow, what a
Hmm.
privilege. Could not agree more with that.
Hmm.
I,
Money can provide that.
oh
Money
yeah.
provides the privilege. So I
Yeah.
think
I
that,
mean, two people who started their own companies like that to be able to take that leap, I don't know
yeah.
how much Like for me, it was a low risk thing because like if everything just fell on its face, I would just go work for the man again, right? So like that's an opportunity a lot of people don't have, right? Like
No, I agree.
drive
And
for
then also, heck yeah. And then also too, I think, sidebar to, getting to know Catie, entrepreneurship is fluid. I think people don't actually talk enough about entrepreneurship being fluid, as in it's not an either or activity. There are plenty of people who are entrepreneurs who still have jobs.
right.
There are plenty of people who are entrepreneurs who be like down period, go get them a contract. It's nothing wrong with being fluid in entrepreneurship, and it doesn't take away from you being an entrepreneur. What it does is tell you that stability matters,
And it's
and that
smarter.
too, it's smarter. Like there's no prescribed way to do entrepreneurship, so don't get trapped in that way of saying, "Oh, I got to make it work." You can go get a job. It's fine. That's not going to take away from your entrepreneurship activities and or dream.
And if anything, like something I'd like to see more often is us talking about the opportunity for people to bootstrap by keeping their job while they test and
Hmm.
try stuff. Like so often folks jump off the cliff and then are begging for venture capital or angel capital and they're diluting their ownership in their company when they could have gotten there. Keep your job, moonlight, test some things, learn some things in a
Hmm.
safe environment, keep ownership of your organization, bootstrap. I think so often we see this as just like this false dichotomy of have my job or quit and live off
Be
my
an
money.
entrepreneur.
Yeah. And it's
Also,
not.
too, it's not. And let's be very clear: majority of businesses are not startups. That's a fact. They're just not startups.
Right.
So I just had this conversation in my class, and because I think everything around us talks about VC, private
Mhm.
equity, startups. It's like, and it's I feel enamored with the conversation to the point where I'm just like, can we please act like there are other companies outside of startups? Because there are. Matter of fact, 80% of those companies are not startups, and that's okay. It's like less than 1% are startups. And so start your own shit when you want to start your own shit. That's what it's about.
I think what I'm waiting for, and I'm interested to hear like whether this pivot's happening at the E minor, but I'm waiting for us to teach entrepreneurship any way other than pitch deck first.
So I think that we focus on entrepreneurial thinking. So
Hmm.
more so than only VCs, right? So I think at the entrepreneurship minor, but I think you're right about that. I think again, and I'm gonna continue to say this, we have a critical thinking problem and articulation of value problem. And that's not really a software problem. That's actual business problem. And when I think about business in general, when I think about even tech companies, you're a business that just so happens to be building a product. Period. That's it. So you need to be understanding what is that you need to do as a
A
business
software
too.
product.
A
Like
software product. It's still something that you're selling,
why do
but
we
you're still
glorify that over a candle or a couch or a deodorant? Like why do we glorify code on a computer?
because code on a computer is one of the quickest pathways to wealth. That's why. And so it's what I'm saying. It's like you have pathways to wealth. Entrepreneurship through startup is one of those pathways because they can have the potential to have large exits. They just require that cash inflection throughout its process. But in reality, outside of that, business is business, right? Every business, a success isn't always, it got to be a unicorn. A success is yours, right? You own what you've defined it, right? So say, for example, me and Catie decide to build a micro tool and we make 50 G's a month. That's success to us.
Are you kidding me? Yeah. I'll take 50 G's a month.
Exactly. So I think when we think about, unicorn or what success is, the definition of success is for you. Like if success is to build cool shit, be happy and build cool shit, you said, okay, well, now I need to understand what aligns with that, right? What have I created something that's aligned with that or allowing me to live that purpose that I have right here.
And that's a
And so
contract.
exactly, right? And so when I think about that, I know we sidebar off the conversation, but I think this is so important to talk about when it comes to entrepreneurship is that number one, it's fluid. Number one is your own. You define that. And entrepreneurship really is not a purpose. I tell people all the time, my clients, entrepreneurship is a vehicle. It's not your purpose.
Mhm.
Your purpose is what it is, right? If some people are, oh, my business, my purpose. No, you're executing purpose through your business.
Yeah.
That means that your business can change. If Katie said the Stradia Partners isn't it for her anymore, that doesn't stop her from being happy or building cool shit. It's just she decided
Or
on a different vehicle.
yeah, or take away from what it accomplished or what it meant to
Exactly.
learn from it, right? So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And like I've never been, I work to live, not live to work. Like I've never been a person who defines myself by my career ever. I think I'm really proud of what I've done, and I'm proud of what I've learned, and I'm grateful for the experiences. If I were to list like who am I, like product manager or business owner would probably not be top 3, maybe not even top 5. But some people are like that. Like some people that's going to be higher on their list. Like anyway, I digress. But absolutely, I think when I think about, it's interesting to think about defining entrepreneurship. I haven't ever reflected on that. And this comes from my time at the E-minor. Like I think the best definition that's ever resonated with me is like entrepreneurship is filling a gap in the universe and doing so uniquely. I would say anyone who has noticed that there's a gap somewhere, there's a need, and they've found a unique and innovative way to fill that gap, they're engaging in entrepreneurship.
I would say also to add to that, innovative is an overused word all the time. So
then you have to define innovative. What is it?
Right. I was like, we got to define innovative. But I think that because I think people think that things have to be nuanced in order to be profitable. And they don't have to be nuanced. Lyft and Uber. Lyft is not nuanced from Uber, but they're still profitable, right? And so is there some differentiators? Yes. And the differentiator of people, there are things that people are willing to pay for.
One's pink.
Literally. They're
storied history of abusing women.
Exactly. So I think, when I want people to understand when it comes to pivoting into any type of thing, it doesn't always have to be nuances. You just need to make it yours sometimes, right?
Exactly. You're still filling a gap.
Yeah, exactly. You're filling the gap. Your differentiator might just be your personality. It could be just your personality. There's plenty of product people, right? But now that we had to dive down the entrepreneurship hole because I think there's further things I feel like people need to understand about entrepreneurship.
Well,
you know what I'm
excited
saying?
for your Raleigh Durham Startup Week panel because you're going to talk a little bit more about this and a little bit more about like, hey, that 0 to 1 moment isn't just building a pitch deck. It's not just talking about raising capital. Like that's just one section, and it might be irrelevant for you if you don't raise capital. Let's talk about all the other things that need to happen for you to prove or disprove this hypothesis that the world needs you to fill this gap. And in this
Yeah, no, I can't wait to be on Raleigh during Startup Week. I was like, y'all want to give me a mic?
Whatever, you need a mic in your hand always.
Listen. I just was like, I'm so glad y'all decided to give me a mic.
Can't wait. It's gonna be amazing.
But yes, okay. So back to you end up moving to director of the dumpster fire.
Director of dumpster fire. I love that. I wish I had. I actually have This is Bernie.
Is that the dumpster fire?
Yeah. I had an employee buy this for me later. But this is Bernie. Isn't he cute?
Yes. So Bernie is a representation of the dumpster fire you were in.
Yeah.
Now that you were managing.
It was nuts. My book of what not to do is really thick. That was it was a very political time, and I had just been thrust into the director role. I learned a lot about a lot of things. I had to figure out department management. I had to figure out hiring. I had to figure out how to kind of work cross-functionally with teams where we were drawn and quartered, Kenyatta. Like our group was trying to refactor this like sprawling ecosystem of duplicative products into something that was defensible. Customer success was trying to maintain this like ridiculous list of customers all on different software and different hardware. And then sales was trying to close government RFP deals, which have the worst sales cycles and the most specific requirements.
Yes, they do.
It was really difficult, and everybody was at each other's throats because our incentives were not aligned. And ultimately, that's what drove me out of the business, because and this goes back to what you can control and what you can't control, is like, if we can't figure out a way to align incentives and make some hard choices, if it's going to be everything everywhere all at once, I'm not going to be able to be an effective leader. So that's ultimately what drove me out. I think I'm grateful for the learning in so many different ways. But it was a hard period in my career for sure.
I bet. So where'd you go after that?
So I left because actually an Automated Insights colleague of mine, David Ivey, got the call there was a private jet company in Eastern North Carolina that had been outsourcing all of its technology, and they were thinking about going public. They were thinking about growth, and they realized that they needed technology to be a core competency of the company itself rather than continuing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so they asked David to build a technology team in Durham to build in-house apps and technology. So he posted in our alumni channel that he was going to do this thing if anybody was interested. And I was like, what do you mean private jet company? Like, let's get coffee. I got to hear about this. And so we went over to Mad Hatter, and he explained the deal to me over coffee and was like, what do you think? You want to recruit a team with me? And build some product at a private jet company. And I couldn't say no. I was like, if this fails and I'm out of a job in 6 months, at least I tried. It was a cool opportunity because I'd never done internal software. I'd always done software as a service. And I'd never had the chance to sort of build a team and a process and a product from the ground up. So it was as close as I could get to starting my own software company without having to raise funding.
But yes, you like, I'm starting, but I'm not starting.
Yeah, exactly. So there was
Yeah.
runway and there was strategy and there was money, but we had to build everything else from the ground up. So
I love that.
yeah, and so what failure looked like for us was David and I started in a little closet room in the American Underground, and failure would be still just me and David in the closet room in the American Underground. So we called a bunch of folks in our network who we thought would be good fits for kind of the early scrappy engineering time, and fortunately we were able to convince them to join. And between that and some other applicants, got the team up to 22 at its peak. And the original mandate was just to launch mobile applications, so we did that. We got a member application out for people to book and manage their flights, and then a pilot application for pilots to be able to see who they're flying, when they're flying, log stuff about those flights. And then the owner was like, hey, you guys are pretty good at this whole technology thing. We're dispatching our aircraft and managing our services and our maintenance and crew in a product owned by Wheels Up, which was a frenemy. We were a partner, but also main competitor of Wheels Up. He's like, I'm uncomfortable continuing to use a product that they licensed to us. I want to untangle myself from this competitor. Can you build me a new dispatching software in-house? And as a product manager, what's your reaction to that? Like, hey, we have a third-party product that does flight dispatching, crew management, crew training, maintenance management, services, CRM. Just build me a new one.
I would have been like, so how much money is attached to that? Because that's a lot of work.
Exactly. That's the right reaction.
I was like, so...
That's
and I might need another product manager, because at this point,
yeah,
who's gonna navigate this?
Yeah, millions of dollars and several years just to get parity with custom software, right? Like that's a ridiculous mandate. This is highly regulated. This is FAA.
I was like, first off, it's heavily regulated. Then number two, there's a whole bunch of nuances in there.
Exactly.
And yeah, there's a whole bunch of nuances there.
So I heard that, and fortunately David had a better response than I did. He was like, let's get creative. And I was like, I'm gonna look for jobs. Like, we're gonna fail. This is a mandate we can never reach. Like, we're gonna spend millions of dollars and still not have parity in a year, and our heads are on a spike. So he was like, give me a weekend. I'm gonna prototype some stuff. I was like, all right, okay. And he comes back and he shows me a drag and drop schedule in Airtable, and it was like, what do you think? And I was expecting to hate it. Didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. And he said, all right, give me another week. I'm going to get it closer. And fortunately, his boss, Tommy Sowers, great, amazing guy. He was president of the company, and he was so all in on this. He was like, I think you guys can make this work in low code tools. I'm completely behind you. I was such a skeptic. I was such a detractor. I was like, this is reckless. What do you mean we're going to dispatch planes out of Airtable? Like, this is reckless. But we ended up getting the green light, and so in the back end, there's still a really complex set of, database tables and third-party syncs and heavy processing on top of that. But the front end is Airtable, and it's how dispatchers and services people and fleet managers and crew management and everybody sees the information housed in the database, which is the source of truth. So we were able to build the UI through Airtable, and we made it backwards compatible with the product we were moving off of. So they'd take actions there, it would sync to the database, and then it would show up in Airtable. And we moved off of that platform onto Airtable in 3 months.
Oh, nah, okay. So who was doing some genius work? But you know what? That's what happens though, when you have the appropriate, I wouldn't say right, but appropriate people in the room and I could always try to deviate from right? Like, it's because the appropriate people in the room who can think bigger than what's right in front of them. And
yeah, exactly.
Not only think bigger, but then have the green light to think bigger. Because I think there's an element of people don't understand that, right? Is that people want to think bigger, but there's never a green light to always think big, right? And destroy some stuff or start from scratch. And you guys have the opportunity to start from scratch and build it how you thought it should be built.
Yeah, and exactly. Like, the credit, you nailed it. Like, Tommy had the vision and trust in us to do this. David had the idea. Aaron Picard, also on the team, designer, had the idea to do this and prototyped it. And then, to the team's credit, everyone, regardless of where they stood on the this is dumb to wow, this is innovative scale, threw themselves at making it work and mitigating the risk of it. And the end result was not clean. I mean, it was messy. A lot of people at the company, we were not the loved people. We were not well liked amongst employees because they ended up having to use a product that was janky at best. But once we made the cut over, every month it got a little better. Every month it got a little better. They're still, I mean, now it took over. My nickname was the spreadsheet killer. They killed physical binders, spreadsheets, shared email inboxes, all consolidating down to this interoperable system. And the end result, now you're seeing the origin story of Stradia, but the end result is you've got a valid, clean, interoperable data set just ready and waiting for reporting, automation, machine learning, natural language processing.
Because that's so really, Catie, you a data scientist. Okay, I got it.
I really, really love data science.
Really, you're a data scientist. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
I can't do any statistics or write any code, so no.
Nope.
But my co-founders both can. So, and that's the part that gets me.
Well, okay, let's talk about that because I don't think you always. So again, I think this is where thinkers matter. Critical thinkers matter, right? I think that there are spaces for PMs that are not technical. I think there are spaces for knowing enough technical stuff to be dangerous. I think there's a thinker space, right? That doesn't have to be an engineer. Because I think people automatically assume that if you're a thinker, you're an engineer. And I think that that's one way. I think that's one way. So you built this, and this is how you got to Stradia, right? So
yeah,
because you started seeing the power.
That's right. And so one of the coolest things we built, we started, like I said, kind of killing processes. So we got past the scope of what Avionics could and could not do, which is the product we replaced, and started being like, okay, how are you augmenting that tool with spreadsheets and shared email inboxes and binders and things like that, and started incorporating those things. And then we started automating everyday tasks. We started, generating reports and PDFs, and then we started getting into more complex processing of what was going on. Coolest thing, probably still to date, we've ever been a part of building, is prior to us doing this, the way that they quote. So private jet industry has a line of business called wholesale, which is where brokers are taking flight requests from high net worth people, and then they're going and they're finding all the options, all the quotes from different operators to fly that flight. So if you wanted to go RDU to Boca Raton this weekend, your broker would go request that flight from 3 to 15 different operators and get a quote for how much that would cost and what jets they could take you on and how nice the jet was and blah blah blah, right? So Fly Exclusive gets about 1,000 inbound quote requests a day from people either direct or from a listserv where people are going, please fly me from point A to point B. I know. And so and they're in Kinston, North Carolina, right? Like this is, so the way they were staffing this is they had a team of like 12 human beings sitting at their computers all in a little huddle. And they're reading all these inbound emails in a shared Outlook inbox. And they're looking at the quote and they're going, that looks like a good quote. I want that. And so that they would drag that into a shared folder with their name on it. So this goes in the Catie folder, which means I'm going to quote it. And then I open the quote again, and then I go in. They had this like cute little tool from their past that they were using, little web app tool, and they would go, okay, RDU to Boca Raton on Friday the 21st at 2 p.m. Midjet, and then they'd need flight time for that because time is money in this industry. So they'd go find flight time. So they'd go to a third-party flight time estimator, which is just for all midjets ever. It's not for their midjets. And they'd get that flight time and they'd put it on the quote. And then they'd get to pricing, and pricing looked like this. Feels like $10,000. And then they'd put $10,000 on the quote, and then they'd send it back to the broker. And if you picture this as a sales funnel, receive the quote and quote it, you're dropping from 1,000 emails to probably quoting 100. And then you're sending those 100 to the brokers. You have to wait for a reply from the broker to say, I want yours out of the other 10 I sourced. So the sales funnel drops from 1,000 to 100 quoted to 20 replied. And some of those replies are going to be 10,000 is too high. I need 8,000, and they're trying to haggle. And so then you go back to the tool and you go RDU to Boca Raton on this day, 8,000, and you plug it in and you repackage it and you send it back to broker. And then you hope they reply. And if they reply and say, I want that, then you create the DocuSign, you send it, and you hope they sign. And then when they sign, you get an email that says they've signed it. And then you go to the schedule and you rewrite all that information to actually book the trip on the schedule, which you can imagine sometimes, oops, I forgot to do that. And now the trip.
Yes. So this is why, listen, this is why it's so important that when you're building something, I always say, give me a whiteboard or a sheet of paper. So I need to understand the process.
Exactly. And that's the key part. And so since we had been collecting all the flight information and all the quote information, we built a system, and this took time. This took about a year. But we affectionately call it auto quote. So it reads all of those inbound quote request emails and it creates a quote from them automatically with 98% accuracy. So unstructured data to structured data in a database. That shows up automatically to the internal wholesale team in an Airtable interface. And so every time it comes in, it's not only coming in with the quote information parsed from the email, but it's also coming in with direct. So it's telling you this is zone 1 to zone 3. This day we have this much availability. Here's it. There's a pricing algorithm that using machine learning takes a look at flight time, which is also a machine learning algorithm based on their flights. And it's directionally and seasonally accurate within plus or minus 6 minutes. It then takes that flight time. It looks at market demand, in-house demand, projected supply, and it puts in directionality. So are we going to have a bunch of flights out of Florida that day, and we want to go to Florida to get, it optimizes well on our schedule. All of that information goes into the pricing algorithm, and it plops the price on the quote and also shows you why it was priced that way with all the breakdown. And if it meets certain criteria, we know it's a flight we want. It's on a day we have ample opportunity. It's not, out to Idaho or whatever. We can actually automatically quote that, generate the PDF, generate the email, and send that back to the person who requested the quote within 3 minutes of them requesting it. And they can actually, and they can actually action the quote directly from the email. So we say, we'd love to fly you. Here's your quote. Here's your PDF. If you want this, click this button and we'll send you a DocuSign. And they go, yep, I want it. And then the DocuSign gets sent. They can fill out their credit card information. They fill out everything they need to know. And then it converts that signed DocuSign to a trip on the schedule. No human in the loop. And so between receiving the quote request and the flight going on the schedule, as little as like 10 minutes, and that drives no human in the loop. So this is not including the quotes sent from humans after it's parsed, between $1 and $2 million a week.
How much were they making me for?
Not that.
Okay, I was about to say they can't be making that before.
Yeah, and it frees up the humans to take the more nuanced quote requests, to do the haggling, to generate relationships with broker agencies, to handle issues. Like the repetitive stuff goes away. So that was a real aha moment for us about like, wow, this applied in strategic scenarios can basically be a money printer.
So, got a question for you.
Yeah.
Is this guy your partner in Stradia?
So yeah, the person that
Okay. Again, I was like, this is how we got to Stradia. The aha moment was.
So Aaron Berdanier is the data scientist that wrote the algorithm, and along with his team, and then Sebastian Flores is the engineer who built the system along with his team. So they were both the director of data science and the director of engineering. And so the reason we left is actually the company. So we were there through taking the company public, and post IPO, as the story always goes, we have to cut costs.
Conversation.
Yep. And so I had to lay off my whole team. It was one of the worst days of my entire career. And so I did that, and the plan for the organization was like, hey, leadership team, just stay and do the work of 20 just with the 5 of you.
Well, we didn't get to 20 people for no reason. Now we started. This is where we're going back to where we started. She was like,
right.
I don't think so.
Listen, like, you go public, you figure your stuff out. Like they had to restructure a lot of things. So we ended up saying, we're not going to do that, but we can continue to work with you as an outside vendor. So that's what we did. Is we left. We founded Stradia. They're still a client. We really appreciate the business. We continue to maintain their stuff and grow their software. But we recognize that, like, man, we've learned a lot from this experience, and there are other people who could really benefit from these strategies. So that's when we left. So we left. Our last day there was July 3rd, 2024, and we're up to 20 customers. And
where are you finding these people? This is great.
Yeah, I was terrified about that, Kenyatta. Like, I don't know how you feel about sales. Like, I was really scared as a product person doing sales. And the fortunate piece, word of mouth has been really good. So that makes me feel happy because people like what we build for them, and then they refer us to people. The 2 main platforms we use when we plug operational gaps where people are using spreadsheets or things like that. We don't like spreadsheets. We want to have a system that is validated and has backups and can be automated. So the two tools we use most often are Airtable and Retool. Both of those companies, or third-party software companies, have partnership networks and refer their clients to services companies when services are needed. And they've both been wonderful partners to us and have introduced us to clients who have then introduced us to other clients.
See how that, so let's talk about that. I want just to get you, because now we got to the aha moment of you guys said, you know what? We're not going to choose to stay in this structure. And now the opportunity had presented itself. And I think people need to understand that's how opportunities show up in so many different ways. And oftentimes it's not always about making a decision to be like, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. At least for me, it was, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know how that looked. I really wasn't clear on defining success for my own myself just yet. And I was just trying to figure it out. So I got to it a lot later in life. But I think this is notable to say that how you were like, yeah, we don't, that's not our vibe. We're not really going to do it that way, but we can be an outside vendor. And I think that people forget that what sometimes it takes is an axe. And I actually have coached 3 people on doing just that. They was like, I don't know about entrepreneurship. And I was like, why don't you pose something to them? Because I think people forget something sometimes when it comes to just how do I get started or transition out of that corporate space, is that this is how you know that things are very transactional in business. Just because you're an employee, you need to understand how needed you are, right? So there are going to be positions that are not that needed. Let's be very clear about that, because that's just what life is. And then there are positions that are. And it's when you begin to understand that leverage, right, that they can't afford to lose you in any capacity, that there's some spaces of negotiation that you can have.
We have to get creative,
right?
Work for all parties, right?
We have to get how do we create the win-win, right? And so I've had, I've seen this. I've actually coached somebody else to do that, and they went on to work. They end up staying there. They quit. They said, I can't do it full time. They would, and the I can't say who the organization is, but they basically said, but we still need you. And he ended up getting paid twice as much and doing less work, right? And that's because he just understood, like, you just have to understand your space sometimes, and the value that you bring, and where there's some negotiation power, and how somebody you work for can actually be your first client. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, like in my case, no, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case for me. Sales is a bit, so when you talk about like sales for me, I think that because I went into the startup space and product, I think that's a little bit different. I work with my software partner because he's great. And so I went into it that way. Right. And then so I was working with some startups. Then I started working with smaller businesses, doing a lot of business. I think people get coaching and consulting mixed up. I think a lot of times people are business strategists more than they are coaches. You know what I'm saying? So coaches help you arrive to an answer. Strategists are working you to get the answer. Right. Consultants, 9 out of 10 times, are trying to give you the answer. So I worked in the business strategist space a lot with smaller businesses. I think there was some realization for me that I was working with small businesses that were too small. Right. I think you know what I'm saying? Because you don't really define small business. When you think about small business, you're thinking about way small. But in reality, think about it. But in small business, really, when we're talking about helping small businesses in North Carolina, small businesses up to 100 employees, there is, from my understanding, there is no amount of money you can make to not be considered that if you're under 100 employees, right? Or it could be, the defined might be up to 10 million in revenue. It's still a small business.
Right.
But when we talk about small businesses, oftentimes we don't talk about that small business. We're talking about like under 100K small business. Or, yeah. So I don't even think when I went into business, I fully understood that. So now that I'm in a different space of like understanding that, I was like, all right, I got to figure this out. And then so what I did was I was like, all right, when I got a contract position so that I can figure some things out and emerge with, again, because entrepreneurship's not linear. I still working with clients, but smaller clients. But then I emerged and was like, yeah, I don't want to work with too small of a client. I really enjoy consulting with small businesses, existing small businesses with a certain amount of revenue. Also working with solopreneurs, because people tend to come to me when they're in transition. So people or smaller companies come to me when they're in some type of transition, and I had to recognize that. I think sometimes, one thing you guys recognized early on was that we have something that nobody else is doing. Let's figure out how we can do more of that. And then I think there's a pathway in entrepreneurship where you have to arrive to that when there are people that you want to target, and then there are people that are consuming what you are giving out.
Yeah, it's just like doing product research and learning like who's using it and what are they using it for. It may not have been its designed purpose. And it's similar, like I'm sure as you're out there, it's like, oh, where am I finding success? Let's lean into that. where am I finding roadblocks? Do I need to push past those? Like, where's my niche? So yeah, I mean, and that's the difference between sitting in a room whiteboarding, which is necessary, and then getting out,
Yep.
get out of the building and actually try stuff. Like those are
Yep. And that's when I tell people I always take that 0 to 1 approach, because now it gives you something. So that's what I did. I was like, oh, and then I realized, oh, this is where I like to work the most. Because like you said, I just, you got to figure out where you like to work. Because you
exactly.
don't like, because it's just, not only is it, you got to have an offer that somebody likes, is also, is that a place that I also want to work as well? Like, I could have that, but is that what I actually want to do
Am I
too?
dreading showing up for work in the morning? Do I get the Sunday scaries? Am I,
Right.
like that's been one of the most unexpected gifts to this is that I haven't had the Sunday scaries in 8 months.
Ooh, that's good. And you up to 20 clients. That's winning.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just been I look forward to the work. I find joy in the work. I don't feel like I realized through my career what are the moments that give me the ick, corporate politics, bosses that don't respect me, things that goes in the give me the ick category. And
Hmm.
like I've been able to weed that out throughout my career and lucky enough to do that. And so like that's the only tried and true career advice I would give any up and coming person is just like things that make you less excited to show up for work on Monday, like just aspire to weed those out of your environment.
Facts. I think my dad told me something that I would leave with people before we wrap, is that my dad told me, he says, you need to create a list. Because when I was in my 20s, I used to cry like I hate the job. I don't want to do. Oh my God. And my dad would be like, I thought you wanted to own your own. And I was like, but I don't know what to do, but I still want to. I was still grappling with this fact of how I wanted to be acknowledged in this corporate space, but I wanted my own thing too. But I still needed this acknowledgement from this space,
Mm-hmm.
right? This validation from this space. And so my dad said, you don't even want to do this forever. And I was like, that's not the point. But what he said was, create a book. And he's like, for all the things that you like about a company, write it down. For all the things you don't. So when you build your own, this is what it looks like. So, and giving me the foundational thought process, right, to critically think about this. And then he also told me not to stay at a job longer than a year and a half. And he said the reason I say that is, if that's not what you want to do, then you're trying to get information and learn, right? And so once you stop learning, you die. You don't grow, so you need to move on.
Your dad is a smart guy.
Yeah, yeah. That was one of the things he left with me. And so, unbeknownst, and my dad passed away now, but unbeknownst to him, I never stayed at a job longer than 2 years, and the longest job I have is 3.9 years, because I didn't recognize that he left something in me that I innately started to do. Right. Even when I didn't think I was feeling it, I was already making critical decisions that sometimes I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know it wasn't this.
And
Or I
and
didn't like this part. So I was like, find something else.
and even if you put aside like the great advice about learning, like the hard reality about today's tech environment is the best way to grow your salary is to leave a job.
Yes, yes. I want every single time. I think that people, but the main problem with people when they leave their job is they don't want to deal with the uncomfortability of it. And then two, people just aren't good at articulating their value.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is, I don't know how to articulate my value, because you've only been articulating your value in outputs. And it's crazy because resumes require outcomes. And so, and also being able to articulate outcomes that are not directly attached to some ROI. Because I think people forget about that, right? It's like, how do I articulate that I was running spreadsheets and they were valuable to the company, but I can't necessarily tie that to a revenue driver?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Spreadsheets is like, okay, I don't care.
Yeah, right. Like, what how you tried it to revenue? So I think that, in the space of pivoting, one thing I think that I hear from you is that you got real comfortable with what it is you wanted. That, like you said, weeding things out, right? And then uh that laid the foundation for getting to Stradia Partners, right? And then sometimes you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to understand the first step.
Exactly. And give yourself a shot. And I think like making the leap for us,
Ooh, say that again. Give yourself a shot.
yeah, give yourself a shot. I think the three of us had joked about it. We all knew it was something we wanted eventually, and it was kind of a no-brainer for us. We when things started to hit the fan, we got together and we're like, all right, we're doing this. Yes. Okay, what is how long of a runway do we have to make no money? What does success look like? What does it not look like? And Aaron, to his credit, one of my co-founders, he led a session with the three of us whiteboarding like what do we want? What are the absolute no's? What are our opportunities? Like we had a planning session together to go over that, and that was our
That
guiding
was
light.
key to yourself.
It
Again,
was.
the strategy session was the key to success.
It was.
And the reason it was a key to your success is because you had focused execution.
Exactly. We knew after we were done, ready break, what each of us had to do to make the reality happen. Yeah, staying aligned together, the three of us, on what that looks like every week is the key to continuing to grow. Is like, are we still staying true to what we said we wanted and what we need? What are the next steps on the stairway? But
I love that. I love how y'all revisit that. I think enough people don't revisit the vision, the mission, the values, and the pathway, your roadmap enough. They veer and they don't revisit. And not to revisit just to see, not to revisit, you need to have a retrospective on yourself.
yes,
You need to have a retrospective on your business, right? And that's
Yeah.
probably what you got to do. And it's like, all right, are we having retrospectives in a way that matters to us so that we're on track?
so critical, and those are the big breakthrough moments where we were like, oh, we need to change this or whatever. Yeah, and we're learning every day. And I would say lastly, like, the opportunity that we were handed in the three of us finding each other, like, I would not be where I'm at if I had not met Aaron and Sebastian. Like, I truly think they both walk on water. They're both so talented and brilliant. I think that is just a lucky moment that we all three of us were at the right place at the right time. And so many folks I talked to who were not successful in businesses similarly, it's because they didn't find the right fit for the co-founder situation.
I agree.
So that's somewhere I've gotten really, really lucky.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Catie. This has been great. Definitely, I'll let you know when this drops, but this has been great. One, I know more about you. I didn't know you were dropping albums. Didn't know you were, I mean, I didn't. Like, I'm sorry, you dropped albums. You dropped albums. You dropped albums. Like, now I gotta figure what I gotta go listen.
No.
But this has been really great. I think you dropped a ton of gems. I think that the many pivots you've had in your career is how it's so important how you got here today. So I'm glad to see that.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully somebody learns from something we said.